If you carried the bar in World War II, the clock started the moment the shooting did. Not a metaphor. A clock. Rough estimates put your life expectancy at around 30 minutes once the fight was on, because every German on the battlefield learned the same lesson quickly. Kill the man with the automatic rifle first, and the entire American squad goes quiet. So imagine moving forward knowing that your weapon makes you louder than everyone else, heavier than everyone else, and more visible than everyone else. You are not just carrying firepower, you are carrying a sign that says, "Shoot me now." The bar was not just a gun, it was a targeting beacon. German infantry didn't need manuals to understand this. The bar spoke for itself. Its sound cut through chaos. Its fire pinned men, and its presence meant one thing. An attack was coming. If that weapon stayed alive, nothing moved. So rifles shifted. Machine guns reoriented. Eyes searched for the man standing kneeling or foolish enough to fire from the hip. That is why the bar gunner rarely died quietly. He was hunted. Not because he was reckless, but because he was essential. Take him out, and the squad lost its teeth. Leave him alive, and you paid for it. Here's the irony. The bar was issued to save lives. It was designed to keep pressure on the enemy so others could advance. And it worked. Just not for the man carrying it. So the real question isn't why enemies feared the bar. It is why armies kept handing one man a weapon that turned him into a countdown. Sometimes the tool is a death warrant. World War I did not reward bravery. It rewarded timing, weight of fire, and the cruel patience of machine guns waiting for men to stand up. The battlefield problem was simple and horrifying. Artillery could smash enemy trenches, tear wire apart, and force defenders underground. But artillery could not follow the infantry forward. At some point, the guns had to stop and the men had to climb out. That pause created the deadliest few seconds in modern warfare. As soon as the shelling lifted, defenders crawled back to the surface, set their machine guns, and aimed at open ground they had already measured. When attackers rose from their trenches, they did not charge into uncertainty. They walked into pre-planned death. Traditional fire and movement sounded clever on paper. One group fires while another advances, then they switch. In reality, this slowed everything down. Half the units stopped shooting at any moment, which meant half the pressure disappeared. Machine guns did not care about clever diagrams. They cared about exposed bodies moving slowly across mud. So men went forward anyway. They always do. They stepped over ladders, tripped on shell holes, and tried to run while carrying everything they owned. And the moment they showed themselves, the battlefield punished them. Rifles cracked. Machine guns screamed. Entire waves vanished before reaching halfway. This was not a failure of courage. It was a failure of tools. Infantry needed a way to move forward without giving the enemy a break. They needed fire that advanced with them, not fire that politely stopped, so everyone could take turns dying. That was the question hanging over the trenches. How do you keep shooting while you move without dragging the crew? Serve machine gun through mud and bodies. How do you advance without announcing to the enemy that for the next few seconds you are helpless? The bar was not born from innovation. It was born from desperation, from commanders watching maps fill with red lines, and from soldiers learning that standing up at the wrong moment meant you would never lie down again, ever again. Out of the slaughter came an idea that sounded almost insane. Instead of stopping to fire, the soldier would fire while moving, not spraying wildly, not dumping magazines, but walking forward under his own fire. This was walking fire, and it broke every instinct drilled into infantry before the war. The goal was not accuracy in the usual sense. It was pressure, continuous noise, continuous impact, continuous fear. The enemy did not need to be hit. He needed to stay down, heads buried, hands shaking machine gun triggers untouched. If that happened, the distance could finally close. The French were first to prove the concept with the Chauchat. On paper, it promised everything commanders wanted. One man carrying automatic fire into the assault. In reality, it jammed when it felt like it kicked unevenly and snagged on anything that dared exist near it. The idea was right. The execution was an insult to the idea. That was where John Moses Browning stepped in. Browning did not design weapons to impress committees. He designed them to survive mud stress and people doing stupid things under fire. His answer was not a light machine gun and not a normal rifle. It was something in between, built for a man who would not hide. The bar was meant to be carried upright, visible, and moving. Its job was to announce danger in advance. Semi-automatic fire did most of the work steady and controlled, keeping the enemy pinned without emptying the gun in seconds. Full automatic fire was reserved for the final moments when distance collapsed and subtlety died. This is why the BAR gunner could not disappear into the formation. Walking fire required presence. You had to be seen to be feared. You had to fire to move and move to survive. The irony is brutal. The weapon that allowed everyone else to advance safely demanded that one man step forward first, and this was never meant to be subtle doctrine. Walking fire was loud, obvious, and deliberately unsettling. It told the enemy that someone was coming straight at them, not crawling, not hiding, not waiting. It was confidence, weaponized courage, translated into motion, and a reminder that momentum itself could kill even before the bullets arrived at their position alive. Again, when the bar finally reached the front, it did not arrive quietly. In fact, it barely arrived at all, at least at first. General Pershing kept most of them locked away, not out of hesitation, but fear. Fear that if the Germans captured even one, they would tear it apart, copy it, and send it back louder. So the BAR waited while men continued to die the old way. Then almost suddenly it appeared. Not one rifle here and there, but many issued together, moving forward at the same time. And that timing mattered. German defenders were used to patterns, barrage pause rifles, machine guns repeat. The BAR broke that rhythm. It did not wait for permission. It walked forward, firing. Reports from the front talked less about body counts and more about reactions. Prisoners taken early spoke of confusion, of a sound they could not place too heavy for rifles, too mobile for machine guns. They described attacks that never seemed to pause pressure, that did not lift when they expected it to. Some surrendered simply because their nerves collapsed before their positions did. The bar became an idea before it became common equipment. German units learned quickly that when that sound started, something was wrong. Heads stayed down longer, machine guns hesitated. Fire was delayed, and in combat delay kills just as efficiently as bullets. It was not magic. It did not win battles alone. But psychologically, it mattered. The BR told the enemy that the assault was not stopping, that there would be no polite moment to recover, no clean break in the violence. And once soldiers learn there is no pause coming, fear spreads faster than orders ever can. That was the moment fear stopped being personal and became contagious, moving trench to trench, unit to unit, faster than commands, faster than reports, and impossible to silence once the BR announced itself to everyone listening nearby. When the war ended, the BR did not retire. It waited. Tens of thousands sat in armories guarded by part-time soldiers and cheap locks, while America convinced itself the violence was over. It was not. The battlefield simply changed addresses. Criminals learned fast. Clyde Barrow preferred the bar over the Thompson for one simple reason. Cars were becoming armor and pistol rounds bounced. A bar round did not. Police hid behind engines and doors, and the BR treated those places as suggestions. Firepower stopped being symbolic. It became decisive. This was not guerrilla warfare or ideology. It was logistics. Whoever carried the BR owned the fight before it began. Bonnie Parker fired it to cover escapes. Officers remembered wood splintering inches from their faces. Nobody argued about caliber or doctrine in those moments. They argued about survival. The irony was thick enough to choke on. A weapon designed to push soldiers across trenches now pushed lawmakers across desks. The violence did not just scare police. It embarrassed the state. And when governments feel embarrassed, they legislate. The National Firearms Act followed, dressed up as regulation, but powered by fear. A $200 tax turned automatic weapons into luxury sins. The BAR had proven something uncomfortable. In the hands of one determined person, it erased numbers, training gaps, and authority. That was the real lesson. The bar did not care who held it. Uniforms, badges, and intentions meant nothing. It delivered control to whoever was willing to pull the trigger first, hardest, and without apology. On the street or on the front, power sounded exactly the same. Everywhere, violence followed the man carrying it, and nobody mistook peace there. When the Army revisited the BAR before the next war, it decided the problem was not doctrine, but discipline. Instead of trusting the weapon's original purpose, planners tried to make it behave like something else. The result was the M1918A2, a version that revealed how easily good ideas get buried under bad assumptions. The new bar was heavier, slower to handle, and far less forgiving. A bipod was bolted to the front, a rate reducer added inside, and suddenly the rifle meant to move forward began encouraging men to lie still. It was now expected to act like a light machine gun, except it still had a fixed barrel and a small magazine. In other words, it was asked to run a marathon wearing a backpack full of rocks. The theory sounded respectable. 2 rates of automatic fire controlled bursts, sustained suppression. The battlefield disagreed. Without a quick change, barrel heat built fast. Accuracy faded. Gunners learned quickly that long bursts punished the weapon more than the enemy. The solution was not engineering. It was restraint, something the design had never been meant to require. Worst of all, these changes attacked the very reason the BAR existed. Walking fire demanded mobility, visibility, and momentum. The added weight punished all 3. What had once been a rifle carried by a man now felt like a burden carried by doctrine. So soldiers did what soldiers always do when theory fails. They removed the theory. Bipods disappeared. Extra hardware was left behind in the mud. Officers complained. Veterans smiled and kept moving. One Marine later wrote that the gun worked best once it was stripped back to how Browning had built it, naked and honest. The tragedy was not that the BAR was flawed, it was that it was misunderstood. Instead of adapting doctrine to the weapon, the Army reshaped the weapon to fit doctrine, and both suffered for it. On paper, the bar became more controlled. In reality, it became less dangerous to the enemy and more exhausting to the man carrying it into the fight. Every extra pound, every added lever quietly shortened, endurance slowed reactions, and reminded gunners that sometimes bureaucracy could weigh more than steel under fire, while decisions far from the front decided comfort, survival, and confidence there. The bar gunner was never confused about his role. Everyone around him knew it, and so did the enemy. In every American squad, the man carrying the bar became the center of gravity. If he fell, the unit lost its voice. If he lived, the fight stayed alive. That is why German reports were clear and consistent. Find the bar, kill the bar. Everything else could wait. This knowledge changed how men moved. BR gunners walked differently, stood differently, and slept knowing they were already marked. They did not talk about it much. Humor helped. Someone always joked that the bar came with a short warranty and no return policy. Nobody laughed too hard. Charles Delop of the 82nd Airborne understood the math. In Normandy, his platoon was trapped pinned down and close to being erased. Retreat meant collapse. So he stepped forward into the open, knelt in the road, and fired. He drew the fire the way the BAR was designed to do. He absorbed it with his body. He kept shooting until he could not anymore, and his unit escaped because he did not. In the Pacific, Wilson Watson carried the same burden with a different landscape. On Iwo Jima, there was no road, only ash and rock. He charged pillboxes, firing from the hip, just as the walking fire doctrine had imagined decades earlier. For 2 days, he kept moving forward while others followed behind him alive because he refused to stop. When his ammunition ran out, he stood his ground anyway, daring the battlefield to finish the argument. Then there was Henry Schumacher in Italy, who turned precision into defiance. He walked straight toward enemy fire, stopped, and killed men who believed distance still protected them. Machine gunners fell. Riflemen fell. The bar spoke, and the field went quiet. These men were not reckless. They were deliberate. They understood the trade being made. The bar was not about survival. It was about exchange. One life weighed against many. One man stepping forward so others could step back. That is why the BR gunner was hunted, not because he was brave, but because he was necessary. Carrying the BR meant accepting that you were already chosen, already counted, already late. And still men picked it up, slung it over their shoulders, and walked forward anyway, knowing exactly how this story usually ended. They did it without speeches, without slogans, and without illusions. The bear did not promise glory. It promised responsibility. It promised that when fear arrived, it would arrive looking for you first. And somehow, in every war it touched, someone always answered that call, lifted the weight, checked the magazine, and accepted that the price of keeping others alive was standing where death could find them easily, quickly, and without asking permission. That choice defined them long after the battlefield stopped making noise for history. The BR did not disappear when the war ended. It stayed. Through Korea, through frozen hills and desperate nights, it kept doing the same job it was never meant to do for that long. By then, doctrine had shifted, battles had changed, but the rifle remained heavy, loud, and stubborn. Soldiers carried it because it still worked, not because it was elegant. Eventually, reality caught up. The M60 arrived with belts, quick-change barrels, and the promise of sustained fire without burning steel into uselessness. On paper, it was progress. In practice, it marked the end of an era where one man carried the weight of momentum itself. The bar faded from issue, but not from memory. Its true legacy was never technical. It was human. The bar proved that the most powerful weapon in a squad does not simply kill the enemy. It shapes behavior. It decides who is hunted. It decides who steps forward when everyone else cannot. The rifle outlived its original purpose by decades, not because armies planned it that way, but because war kept demanding the same sacrifice. Someone had to carry the thing that made movement possible. Someone had to be visible. Someone had to draw fire so others could breathe. That is the uncomfortable truth brochures never print. Firepower is easy to admire. Responsibility is harder. The bar offered no illusion of safety, only a choice. You carried it to kill, yes, but also to absorb attention and danger. So the question remains, when you pick up the heaviest weapon, are you doing it to end lives faster, or to spend your own so others can walk away? The BR answered that question,